Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Creativity-Hive's weekly program. This is actually a bonus episode. We aren't usually here on Thursday afternoons. I am Miriam Haugen. I'm part of the Creativity-Hive team. We help budding videographers achieve massive post-production skills through one-on-one teaching and live group coaching. And our weekly hangout brings you people working in video industry from across the globe. But today we have a special treat. Tim Kitchen is a senior education specialist, not specific to video, but encompasses all the apps, right? Welcome,
Miriam.
Tim.
It's good to see you.
Good to meet you. So I am always curious about how people get to where they are now. What was your training? What was your background? I've done a little research, but I'd rather hear it from your words.
Well, actually, you were talking about video and me not specifically being related to video, but in fact, video is my thing. It's my Premiere Pro is my favorite of all the Adobe applications. And I've been involved with video production from a young lad when my father was shooting in Super 8 film on his camera, and as we were traveling around the world, and I used to help him splice that film together, literally making the cuts and sticking it all and learning the very basics of editing. And then when we're able to get sound onto the film, and we'd actually send the film, I live in Melbourne, and we'd post the film up to Sydney to get a soundtrack put on the actual film. Then it would come back to us again in Melbourne, and then we'd have lots of fun putting sound effects. So if we were in Europe and looking at some of the great waterfalls in Europe, the sound effect for the waterfalls would be a flushing toilet. Really fantastic stuff. But back then it was just awesome. And ever since then, I've just been fascinated with film and video production and gone through the years. And I think it's the most important communication tool for educators. And that's what I deal with. I've been a teacher for 23 years, a classroom teacher for 23 years, and now working in this role as Adobe's senior education specialist for the last eight and a bit years. So it's been a fantastic role, and I've just loved every day of it.
Awesome. So, are there any, so what surprises you? If you were starting out today, what surprised you when you were starting out, and what surprises you recently? Anything? That's kind of a tough question.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting
open-ended question.
I'm always surprised in lots of different ways. I'm always impressed and surprised with the work that young students can produce from professional software. One of the things that I've learned over the years is don't limit your students' creativity by maybe the lack of understanding from their teacher. And one of the things that we've been pushing in teacher education for a number of years now is that you're not the holder of all knowledge, you are the facilitator. And you're not going to know everything. Your students are likely to know more than you in lots and lots of topics, and you shouldn't be threatened by that. You should encourage that and welcome that. And so when you see students some of them are masters when it comes to video production. They've got their own YouTube channels, and they're only in primary or elementary school. And so it's just wonderful to be able to give them ideas and opportunities to be creative and to share their passions and to really foster them as young people as they grow. And then one of the things I try to encourage, particularly teenagers, is to turn their passions into a job while they're still at school. Become entrepreneurial. I just love it when I get an opportunity to talk to young people about that. And I get to meet teenagers literally all over the world who are now, while they're still at school, they're earning money being a videographer. They're earning money being a photographer. They're earning money being a coder. They're earning money. They're building their little startup companies while they're still at school. And I just think that's awesome. And when I used to be a school administrator, one of the things we'd do when we get resumes in, I'd be looking at them and just seeing these young teachers. Have they ever been involved in anything other than teaching? Have they ever started up a small business? Have they ever been involved in failing in a business? Because that just shows so much life experience. And now when we're employing people in our part of Adobe, it's exactly the same. I'm looking at resumes, or our HR people are looking at resumes and looking at what experiences have they had, how entrepreneurial have they been. So I'm constantly surprised, but also very pleased to see those surprises when they come up.
I always find the entrepreneurial minds just are very exciting to me. I'm going to go ahead and add Neil to the stream because he may have some questions here. But
Hey, Neil.
Hello.
I have another tough question for you. How do you teach creativity? Can you teach creativity?
Well, absolutely, and I've always believed that, and I've never really realized how important it is to teach creativity and to encourage and foster creativity until really being at Adobe, because it's been our mantra. It's been such an important part of my job now, is to be encouraging that. And the more I dwell on it, in my 23 years of being a classroom teacher, I realized that every day I was encouraging creativity, and I was trying to be a creative teacher as well by modeling good creativity without realizing how important it was. And since then, I've read a lot of the work of Sir Ken Robinson, and I've watched just about every one of his presentations. I've actually met the man 3 times, and which is awesome because, you know, he lived in Los Angeles and I live in Melbourne, so I've only sort of had the opportunity to meet him a handful of times. We actually had him booked in for Adobe Max last year with a special education track, and very sadly we lost him to the world in August last year. But the work that he did to drive the importance of creativity and the fact that it can be taught, and getting back to that question, that's why Stanford University designed the design thinking process, to encourage creativity, to encourage a scaffold on how to learn to be creative and to solve problems in a creative way. And I used to teach multimedia, and I used to teach IT, and I used to teach art and design, and we'd have a design process to help young artists, young budding artists, to teach them to be creative. And sure, you find that there are people who are naturally creative, and there are people who believe that they're not creative at all. But I love working with particularly teachers who say, look, I'm not creative, you're not going to be able to get me to be creative. But then when you give them access to some software like Adobe Spark, and you think, oh, okay, maybe I can do something here. And then suddenly their maths lesson becomes a really exciting creative opportunity for learning, because they've added an extra element of digital creativity to the way they communicate. And that's just lovely. And that they're the things that keep me going, keep me going every day, to try and inspire young people and educators to be creative and to learn to be creative.
One of the big things, I'm going to kick in here and just say that one of the big things I think to get towards a creative mindset is a willingness to kind of live with uncertainty. Because when you're trying to create something, it means you're trying to do something you aren't really sure how you're going to do or how you're going to work. And for a lot of people, that's really frustrating. And to get people to just sit back and say, it's okay. You're not going to know how it's going to go. And if you let that get frustrating for you, then it kills the whole thing. You've got to learn how to walk into all the uncertainty and go, okay, fine, it's uncertain. So I'll try this, I'll try this, I'll try that, and not judge yourself immediately on how anything works.
That's so true. One of the things that we encourage educators particularly is to not focus so much on the end result, not focus so much on the grade at the end, but to focus on the process that it took to get to that grade. And that's where the creativity is encouraged, and that's where it's learned, because that's where the uncertainty is. Once you've got the end result, you've got certainty. But as you're building up to that that certainty, that's where the uncertainty is, that's where the disharmony is, that's where the risk-taking takes place, and that's where creativity happens, because there's such an association between disharmony, as you're saying, risk-taking, and creativity.
Yeah, and I don't know. We found out when I was in my mid-50s, I think it was, Miriam, something like that, early 50s, mid-50s, that we first had our then about 4 or 5-year-old son diagnosed as autistic at about the same time as our daughter, who was in college, was presumed to be autistic, and later identified as high-functioning Asperger's, which is autism with a different label. And after looking at the whole thing, and of course doing a really deep dive, because that's what I do, we figured out after a little bit that oh, that's me. And so while autistics are noted for not liking uncertainty, I've always been able to live with a lot of uncertainty on things and just find it an intriguing situation. It's like the emotions are disconnected when I'm uncertain about something that I'm working on. My emotions are kind of disconnected from it, and I realize that has been a big help for me in doing something that is what other people would consider creative, because I can get frustrated a little bit of this kind of stuff, but I don't seem to have the same emotional reaction that a lot of people have. And I've tried to talk about that with some people, and they've looked at me like, you're nuts. Because when I say you just have to learn to get past that emotional reaction when you're trying something and it doesn't work right.
Yeah.
And they go, well, of course you're going to feel that. Well, yeah, okay, you can feel it, but then you have to say, yeah, but I'm just going to let that go and then see what happens. And they look at me and just go, it's not happening. Well, until you can find a way to let that happen, creativity is just not going to be your thing.
Very true. We have a course that we run called the Adobe Creative Educator course, and it has various levels. And we ended up with about 15 professors, associate professors and PhDs from all over the world who helped us put these courses together. And I run a course every month that helps guide teachers through that course if they need the guiding. You can do it on demand, you can do it on your own, but if you want to be helped through it, I'll hold their hands through level 1 of the course. And it takes about 2.5 hours to do it properly, but the video content that we have from these professors is outstanding. It's not about Adobe, it's about creativity. And the various definitions of creativity, the various content we're hearing from experts who have studied this area for many, many years. It's just inspiring to see how it's presented. And I encourage every teacher to have a look at the Adobe Creative Educator course, even if you're not interested in Adobe, just to learn a bit more about how important creativity is in education and in life.
That is awesome. And I think that in this day and age, you have to be more creative than ever before, because our life is changing so rapidly. And I was listening actually to a talk that you gave on your website about to a group of students, high school students, I assume, that were and saying that talking about how careers change, what you prepare yourself for. You're probably going to change careers 5 times in your life, and that just requires a lot of flexibility and creativity to navigate all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ken Robinson talks about how in big business industry, what are the things that industry leaders are most concerned about? And that is that they're not able to find people who have got a creative mindset. They're looking for creativity. They're looking for people who are creative to employ them. And it's becoming a really important soft skill. The World Economic Forum, they've been doing research on this for many years. In fact, the concept of creativity has come up as the most in-demand soft skill for well, when I first read it was 2016. It came in the top 10, and just in 2019, it was the #1 most in-demand soft skill from their research. It's amazing.
Yeah. So how do you teach creativity? Do you just, is it like a muscle that you exercise? How do you get people to be more creative?
Well, look, you can go through this, like I talked about the design thinking process for a start. So there are formal processes you can go through to help people think about creativity. But in a basic format, the way teachers have been doing this for years is doing things like brainstorming, getting students to just think of alternative solutions to a problem. They might have a solution straight away. They might come up with, oh yeah, that's the answer. They go, maybe let's think about this from a different perspective. Maybe let's think about, let's pretend we're someone else from a different culture. How would they think about solving this particular problem? And so by doing that, it starts to re-switch your brain in terms of thinking and empathizing from someone else's perspective. And by doing that, you're stimulating that creative side, because you are looking at a different perspective. You are coming up with a range of solutions before you decide on which one is going to be the solution you want to continue working with. So there are scaffolds, there are ways of working this through. And we've been talking about this for years. I think back to the work of Benjamin Bloom back in the mid-1950s, where he came up with the Bloom's taxonomy, and at a very base level. And this is where a lot of educators are stuck, at the bottom of the pyramid, which is remembering facts and figures for an exam. And there's not a lot of creativity involved in that. But that seems to be where we're stuck, because we've got so many tests that we need to aim for. And so we're just constantly trying to remember facts and figures for an exam and then get ready for the next assessment and then the next assessment. But what Bloom is arguing is that you need to move up that taxonomy. At the very peak of the pyramid is creativity, is creative thinking. And that's what's really special about being a teacher, is giving those students opportunities to be creative and to move beyond just the facts and figures for a test. Because our job as educators is to prepare young people and older people for lifelong learning and lifelong creativity.
Right. Did I get the name right there on the screen? Benjamin Bloom.
That's
is that
Benjamin Bloom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great education psychologist back in the 50s.
All right. I actually was, both Neil and I in a younger life were teachers, took education classes and studied a bit of education psychology. So so Adobe Max is next week. Are you involved in that? I would think you would be.
Yeah. For the first time after 8 years at Adobe, I've actually been invited to present at Adobe Max, which I'm really excited about. And we've got a session on character animator that we're doing. I'm linking up with a fabulous teacher in Los Angeles, and that's Lisa Gottfried from New Technology High. And I'm also linking up with a fabulous higher ed educator in New South Wales, Craig Dalmeyer Power. And so the three of us have put together this presentation called, it's all about getting a student's voice to be heard when the student doesn't want to be in front of the camera, when a student doesn't want to be in front of their peers. And there's lots of students that we work with that just, when the camera's there, they freeze. Or when they're asked to present something in front of their peers, they just can't do it. And so an application like Adobe Character Animator gives them an opportunity to share their voice with a puppet, a digital puppet representing them. And it opens up a whole new world for them to be creative, but more importantly, in a sense, to share their opinions that they haven't been able to share because they've just been so shy in the past. So that's my presentation at Max.
Awesome. Do you happen to know the number of the class?
Which session it is?
Yeah, which session it is? If I was going to look it up.
We can look it up. In fact,
okay, if I put you on the spot here.
Yeah, I've got my screen there ready to share if you want to just bring it up.
Oh, yeah, that would be great.
And what we can do is just do a quick search for Max. I was going to promote Max a little bit later, so what I'll do is just quickly bring the Max website up to the share screen. And if we go
While
to
you're doing
speak,
that, Donnie said that's an awesome use of CA, and I agree. What a great idea.
look at all the amazing speakers. There's so many of them. They're all in alphabetical order. So I'm just searching down to find my face, and that would be the way to work out where that session is. And we're expecting millions of people to be involved in Max this year.
Wow.
That's what we had last year, and it's just
how many were there last year? Do you know?
Last time I checked, there was close to 5 million people who'd watched the recording soon afterwards. I'm not exactly sure how many were live. So we're looking at session 292, giving students a voice with Character Animator. That's the one to watch for.
Session 292. I'm going to put it up I'm going to put it up there for everybody.
Terrific.
Oh, I should say, well, that's all right. That's the one you want to look for, guys.
Absolutely. And while I've got my screen shared at the moment, and it seems to be stuck a little bit on the website there, I might have to refresh. Yeah, so it doesn't seem to like me dragging off the website. Are you still seeing Adobe Max logo there, or?
Yes.
Maybe if you can stop sharing and bring it back up again, that might.
Well, we'll try that. Remove. And put it back.
Put it back.
There.
No, it's still there. Gosh, there you go. Sure. Well, what we can do there, maybe if there we go. It's coming back. It's slowly, the website's slowly disappearing.
Okay.
There you go. But this photo here, it as it starts to reveal, it reveals kind of what I was doing before COVID. And then a little bit, the photo that hasn't quite revealed there is what I've been doing since COVID. And prior to COVID, I was traveling nearly every week somewhere in the Asia Pacific region, or as we call it, the Australasian region, which is Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia, working with teachers and students and encouraging them to work with their Adobe tools, because just about every school and university has access to these amazing creativity tools. They're just not aware that they've got them, or they're certainly not aware of what to do with them when they've got them. And you find it's really just the media IT teachers and the arts teachers that are using Adobe tools on a regular basis. But my passion is to share the value of Adobe tools with English teachers, with humanities teachers, with language teachers, with mathematics and science educators. And that's what I really love to see, when a geography teacher will say to their students, all right, instead of doing a PowerPoint presentation or a poster, let's create a video documentary based on this particular unit of work. And let's use something like Spark Video just to get started with that. And maybe later on, we'll work with Premiere Rush, knowing that they probably will never touch Premiere Pro, but at least we've got tools that they can actually work with. And who knows, some of those students might move on to work with something like Premiere Pro and After Effects.
And they're building a vocabulary, right? They're understanding a little bit more about the process and how it works. And I'm reminded of our daughter. I was meeting with a teacher of hers way back when, and he thought because she was a tag student, that's talented and gifted, okay, that she would take the assignment and go farther with it, dive deeper, write a paper or something.
On her own, mind you.
On her own, yes. And so he gave options that you can either write a paper or you can answer the questions at the end of the chapter. And he was surprised that she just answered the questions at the end of the chapter because it was easier.
Yeah.
I was going, no, she's not stupid. She's going to do the easy one. So that's the one thing, is I think you can't just say, oh, wouldn't it be great to take this assignment and do it and use Adobe Spark or create a little video, or because it is going to require more time of a student, and they have to, sometimes you just have to push a little bit.
Well, that's how creativity happens. It doesn't just happen overnight. Creativity is a process,
Right.
and you need to actually do something to be creative. And the process of making a video, well, that is very much a creative process, and it involves a lot of skills. In most cases, it involves collaboration, working with a team to work it together. And collaboration is another one of those really important soft skills that we're trying to encourage young people particularly to have before they go into the workforce, because we work in teams all the time. And so creating a video encourages that. It encourages problem solving. And of course, problem solving is a fundamental skill that we're looking for in young people. We seem to have lost.
No.
No, you're still there? Good.
I'm still here. I'm
Excellent.
still here. I'm experimenting. I decided to try a different view.
She's being creative.
Nice. I'm being creative. Like there you go.
Live.
Risks. Good.
if I don't just do it, I'll never, never get any farther. So what are you passionate about outside of your work?
Well, I love sport, and there's a unique game that you probably never even heard of before called cricket.
Oh.
Have you come across that sport before?
Cricket, yes. Well, I know there's a bat, and I know,
yep.
But that from what I've been able to see on the BBC, it doesn't look very much like baseball.
No, quite different to baseball. There are some similarities in terms of skills, like throwing and hitting and eye-hand coordination and running. But cricket's been around for many, many years. It's very much a British sport. And
right.
It's huge in India, absolutely huge, and huge here. And I've been playing cricket since I was, 9 years old. I used to live overseas when I was quite young. I lived in the Middle East for many years, so I wasn't exposed to cricket as a young lad like many Australian young boys are. So I came into it a little bit late, but just loved it. And I still play, and I'm playing in what's called a veterans over 50s league. And when a cricket season is going to be starting again soon, it's a cut down season because of COVID, but I love it. And so it forces me to get fit. It forces me to keep running through the year just to keep a level of fitness so that I can still play and do well. So that's one of my passions is playing cricket and watching cricket at the highest level. And we're very fortunate living in Melbourne. We've got the Melbourne Cricket Ground, which is one of the largest sporting grounds in the world, fitting just over 100,000 people. And there'll be a test match which goes potentially over 5 days between England and Australia that'll be starting on Boxing Day on the 26th of December. And we're likely to have, if we're allowed to, 100,000 people watching a cricket match between Australia and England on Boxing Day. And I just love it when that happens.
Oh, that sounds like that's amazing. 100,000 people. And who
watching
knew?
a game that goes over 5 days, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. We do have to stay in shape though, don't we? You can't just take it for granted when you're past 50 that you'll be able to still run and jump and do the things you did when you were younger.
Well, and also the way that you have to keep your brain going, because I would never have expected that I would be where I'm sitting right now. Because for all those years, we had a portrait studio, and Miriam and I were both noted professional portrait photographers. Well, due to technical changes and all, when it became possible for everybody to have a camera and take pictures like crazy without any cost due to digital phones and digital cameras, it became much more difficult for professional portrait photographers to make a living doing it. So we didn't really need both of us being available anymore, and I was trying to figure out what the heck I was going to do. And I decided, well, maybe I'll just check out this whole video thing a little bit and see what it's like. Well, that was back over the fall and winter of 2013. And I went in a period over the winter, spring there, in about 3 months from asking the most questions on the Adobe SpeedGrade forum. SpeedGrade was an application they've since killed, but it was to do color correction on video. It was a really interesting application. But I went from asking the most questions to answering the most questions in a fairly short period of time, at which point Patrick Palmer, who's now the head of all Adobe video programs, but at that time, he was the head of SpeedGrade. He had created it with a partner, and then Adobe bought it, and he'd stayed with the program. He asked if I was going to be attending this huge National Association of Broadcasters conference in Vegas. I had no clue what it was. I didn't know I get this email. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what NAB was. And I went down the hall to Miriam and was telling her that this is really funny. I mean, I got this and I looked up who this guy was. And this is kind of funny, and she's looking at me very seriously. And I'm going, apparently this is not as funny as I thought it was. And I came back to my office and sat down here and was working away. And about 5 minutes later, I realized Miriam was standing in the doorway behind me back there, just looking at me. And I turned and looked like, what? And she's going, if we were 20 years younger, you'd be going. And I'm thinking, yeah, but I'm not. And she just goes, you're going, and turns around and goes to get me tickets. Well, that started a change in life that we had never anticipated. And I do some video capture, but what I mostly, I teach people, pro colorists, people that work in video post-production houses, how to color correct in Premiere Pro if they need to do that rather than use Resolve or Avid or Baselight. And that's something that I would never have ever thought of getting into, becoming an expert in video color correction on a professional basis. And that's exactly the kind of thing that you have to stay fluid, even well into your 60s, because you never know what the heck you're going to be doing next. This world is changing around us so fast, and it's kind of fascinating to just try and stay up with it.
That's so true. Yeah. And that's why we encourage problem solving. It's why we encourage collaboration. It's why we encourage creativity. So you can keep doing that and keep making changes in your life and for the better. So it's great to hear that story, Neil.
Yeah. So I'm going to put in a little plug here for all of our listeners that we have a questionnaire, because one of the things that we are doing is designing our own education that we're doing. We want to help budding videographers achieve massive post-production skills, and primarily in Premiere Pro, but really we want to know what the needs are. So we have in the comments there is a link to a questionnaire. We want to get to know people. We want to find out what they need. So that's my little plug there.
Now, I'm going to jump back over to just talking about Adobe Max for another session, because, of course, Mo, one of our other Creativity-Hive people, is doing a lab on doing making Mogert's motion graphics templates in After Effects. And his session, is L714, L714. And of course, the L is for a lab, meaning it's an hour-long program. He got an hour. I only got a half hour. And mine is S565, and that is just for half-hour session on thinking like a colorist, color correction in Premiere Pro. So, but there are so many things. I mean, Christine Steele is teaching classes. I mean, Christine as an editor is the most crazy thing to watch. Just sitting at a laptop, she can be trimming videos down to the frame, down a sequence, while she's talking with you, and she's going faster than I can follow. So you have people like Christine with these incredible skills that are teaching courses on there, and it's free and for everybody around the world. I mean, for crying out loud. This is the kind of thing that people should be getting kind of excited about and going to, because there's some amazing stuff there. It's nice after, I don't know how many Maxes, what about 2018 or 2017, something like that was the first Max I was a teaching assistant at. And I'm finally a presenter this time. But, I've been at a lot of live Maxes, and I'd prefer a live Max, but I'll take this. But and while it's free for everybody around the world, for crying out loud, everybody go register and get some classes. It's awesome.
Yeah, we're really pleased that we can promote Max. I've only been to one Max in Los Angeles, and I was just blown away by it. But then to be able to share that with all of my Australian teachers that I work with now being virtual, it's such a blessing. And we've got teachers who are going to take time out next week to make sure their students are being part of Adobe Max as well. And it becomes a global audience. And it's just great that they're planning for 3 different time zones, and yeah, just brilliant.
Right. So do you think that they'll go back to a live or try to do a hybrid? Do you any rumblings, or you want to make any predictions?
Oh, look, it'd be very hard to go back to just purely a face-to-face. Mind you, when it was face-to-face, there was a live component to it as well, but it wasn't getting anywhere near the numbers that we got last year. So I guess it depends on how successful this year is, and then I'll make a decision for next year. Maybe a bit of both, who knows? We're already starting to think about what we're doing. I run a summit, an education summit every year, and obviously the last couple of years purely online. But next year for my education summit for the Asia Pacific or the Australasian region, we're looking at doing a hybrid event, and it'll be based out of Sydney. We'll have a live audience of presenters who are Adobe education leaders, which is the highest level of our education leadership program at Adobe. So they'll be together face-to-face, presenting to camera out to a wider audience. So there are lots of ways of doing things hybrid.
Right.
Well, of course, one of the other people presenting at Max that's an Aussie is, of course, Mike Russell, who's doing stuff on sound as always. And, you know, he's another person that is always worth listening to and is such a sweet person in person and incredibly helpful. So I would imagine that you have other people down there too. I actually know quite a number of Aussies that I've met at NAB or Max. So,
yeah, plenty of us Aussies around.
Yeah. Well, that is great. Any parting shots for either of you? I think it's.
Yeah. Look, I'll just share my screen again if that's okay.
Sure.
If you can bring that up, and I just did a little bit of an analysis of how things have compared pre-COVID to past-COVID. Pre-COVID, I was doing an average of 3.5 events per week around the Asia Pacific region with lots of travel, impacting about 478 teachers and students. But post-COVID, an average of 5.5 events per week, again, all over the region, but not traveling, with an impact of 715 teachers and students. So there has been benefits in not having to travel out face-to-face, a lot more impacts. And I just want to emphasize a couple of things here. The Adobe Education Exchange, edx.adobe.com, that is, just in July this year, we hit 1 million teachers who have joined up the Adobe Education Exchange. It is just going from strength to strength as a portal. So if you're involved in anything to do with education, whether it's elementary school, high school, whether it's college, whether it's a training facility, then the Education Exchange has resources for you, totally free. Lots of courses, brilliant teacher-to-teacher professional learning, and it's all about teachers helping other teachers. And then there's my website, timkitchen.net, and that just gives you an idea of all the things we've been doing. You can look at what we did at our summit recently, and I do a show every second Wednesday night on YouTube called Inject Creativity Live. And if you go to timkitchen.net, you'll see the latest episode of that show and find out how you can watch past episodes. So I just wanted to put that out there before I go. I mentioned the Adobe Creative Educator Program. That's the link for it, adobe.ly/ACE for any teachers out there. And if you know a teacher out there, let them know about the Adobe Creative Educator Program. And finally, we talked about Max. I just wanted to make sure that we did have that in the discussion. So
right.
If you haven't already registered for Max, make sure you do.
Awesome. That is great. Some great resources there. And yes, we are involved with some local educators here that are in the creative arts that we will need to make sure they're hooked up. So thank you so much for joining us for this special episode.
Thanks for the opportunity, Miriam and Neil, and all the best with your show moving forward, and all the best to everyone watching.
Oh,
and nice to get a chance to meet you. I, of course, I'm one of those that looks forward to getting back to in-person events. I really miss NAB and Max in person. Although the online classes for Max are awesome. But so I hope, though, that we do get back to an in-person event, and would love to actually see you in person, because if you've been to either of the last two Maxes in person that were in LA, I was there also, but she was 17,000 people there. I can't understand how we missed each other.
Can't believe it. Yeah.
Well, all right. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Join us next week, 11 a.m. Pacific time, for a special Halloween episode.
Ooh, we've got some fun stuff coming for that.
Yeah, we're going to have fun with that. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.